Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women in DevOps. Thank you so much for being here with us today. In today's discussion, we're going to be talking about that transition from engineer to engineering manager. For those of you who have not been to one of our events before, Women in DevOps is a not-for-profit initiative through Trust in Soda and a platform for us to learn, engage, network, and inspire our future leaders of the tech industry. We have a brilliant panel lined up for you today who will introduce themselves in just a moment. My name's Hayley. I'm a co-founder of Women in DevOps and a director at Trust in Soda, and I'll be co-hosting today with my lovely colleague, Yesenia.
Hey everybody, I'm Yesenia Martinez. I'm super excited to be here today. I'm a partner at Women in DevOps and also a technical recruiter at Trust in Soda, so I do find this particular topic super interesting. I mean, I'm passionate about helping engineers to achieve their career goals and more or less supporting them taking them that next step. But before we begin, just a few house rules. Firstly, we are recording today's event, so if you have been muted upon entry, but we do want to make this webinar as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions, don't hesitate in popping them in the Q&A below, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. We'll also be writing a white paper post event, so we'll ensure all your questions are also answered in that. And a big shout out to Latinas in Tech and Women Who Code, who are pleased to be collaborating with you today and bringing our communities together. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. We have lots of people tuning in today, which is great. We are also joined today by the lovely Ari Waller from JFrog, who are one of our incredible corporate sponsors. I have my JFrog t-shirt on, especially today, and I'm going to hand you over to Ari, who I believe has some exciting giveaways.
Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and just share my screen, and hopefully everyone will be able to see this. Hi, everybody. I am Ari Waller, and I'm the Meetup Event Manager for JFrog, and we are so excited again to be a platinum sponsor for Women in DevOps for another year. I'll share just a little bit about who we are. JFrog is the DevOps software company known best for Artifactory, which is considered by many to be the gold standard for managing your artifacts and dependencies. Now, I also know that some of you may have heard that JFrog and Docker announced a partnership in the beginning of 2021. And we want the Women in DevOps Meetup community to take advantage of this by taking the Docker Challenge. Besides the JFrog t-shirt, you will be awarded a opportunity to look at the JFrog platform, the free version, which you'll be able to take with you, no credit card at all, just for you to play around with for your projects. So it's a great opportunity to do some great stuff with Docker. And also with the JFrog free subscription, you can use Docker because it's capable of functioning as a pull-through cache for Docker Hub. And because of the partnership I mentioned before, you're going to be exempt from all the rate limits on pulls for free and anonymous accounts. So hopefully that'll be useful for some of you. So how do you take advantage of that? To do that, in keeping with the theme tonight, while many engineers want to transition into management, you're still engineers at heart, aren't you? And you want to tinker and play with some really, really cool things. So tonight, JFrog has a raffle for attendees only. JFrog is going to give you a chance to enter to win one of 3 Raspberry Pi 4 desktop kits. You can enter with the QR code that you see on the screen or the bit.ly link that you see. I'm also going to drop it in the chat shortly. And when you enter, you're going to have an opportunity to opt in to receive an email with the Docker Challenge. So a lot of giveaways and opportunities and free stuff available. And we will announce the selected winners in 2 business days. Once, from a compliance standpoint, the winners actually accept the prize, then I can make them public and we can rejoice with them. And I want to thank you very much. I am so excited about the webinar tonight. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Hayley.
Thank you, Ari, and good luck to those lucky winners. Thank you so much for your support. So before we kick off, we are going to attempt to do a quick poll. We have a question for our audience, and hopefully this will help somewhat steer the direction of our discussion today. The question will be on your screen, and you'll have 1 minute to answer And the question, what we would like to know is,
what were the main challenges you have faced in the transition from engineer to engineering manager? So we've got a few answers here. We've got imposter syndrome, aligning engineering performance to business performance, adapting to the new role, setting clear goals and expectations, coping with rejection / taking criticism, work environmental issues, project management, managing the team. Really interested to see what the answers are going to be.
just to add, if there are other challenges, please put them in the chat box in the Q&A. We will discuss those as well. We have 10 more seconds, everyone. You're on mute, Yesenia.
So the results are in. A majority have voted imposter syndrome, interestingly enough. So 28% for imposter syndrome. Then we have 17% for aligning engineering performance to business performance. Exact same 17% for adapting to the new role. 11% we have setting clear goals and expectations. We have 40% with coping with rejection / taking criticism, and 3% for work environment issues. And finally, we've got project management and managing the team with both 6%. Very interesting. Like I said, I'm sure we're going to touch on these topics in today's discussion. So without further ado, a big welcome to our incredible panel. If I can ask you all to introduce yourselves, that would be fantastic. Lisa, would you like to kick us off?
I'd be happy to. Super excited to be here. My name is Lisa Schisler-Smith. I'm an engineering manager at Netflix and a director for our local chapter of Women Who Code in the Raleigh-Durham area. And I've been an engineering manager for nearly 4 years now.
Ali, do you want to? Yeah.
Happy to. Ale Paredes, an engineering manager at Stripe. I'm based in New York, Brooklyn. Also, on my free time, I organize the local chapter for Latinas in Tech here in New York City. And both very passionate about engineering management and building diverse and inclusive teams. So very excited to be here.
Rafaela, then Stella.
Yeah, I'm Raquel Robertson. I'm engineer manager at StockX. Very passionate about engineering and an engineering manager as well. I have a project in which we teach girls to code. Mostly it's towards Latin American and mostly South American girls that wants to get into code. And I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Stella Camacho. I'm a cars engineering manager of cars.com. And I've always been a geek. And finally, about 10 years ago in 2010, I learned all about cloud engineering and have not looked back since. I'm passionate about cloud security. And in 2018, I did accept a role at a startup as an engineering manager. And my journey as a manager or in a leadership role started then, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. We're very happy for you all to be here as well. So whilst we're on the topic of challenges, we will talk about imposter syndrome. I think it's something that comes up quite regularly, and I'm very keen to hear about different sort of coping mechanisms there and how you kind of, you know, overcome that when you're feeling that way. But wanted to kick off, let's jump straight in. What are some of the biggest challenges and rewards that you faced as an engineering manager? Lisa, maybe, you know, you can kick us off. 4 years in engineering management, I'm sure.
Sure. So I would say some of the biggest challenges are making that transition from being an individual contributor and being able to sort of see tangibly what your work is at the end of a day. As an engineering manager, I talk a lot. Now I'm helping people, I'm a force multiplier, I'm advancing things, but there's less individual, like check things off of a list, feel accomplished kind of sense. So you have to readjust how that feels. Imposter syndrome, very much so. I was brought into a startup as well with the promise of, you know, they wanted someone who had been a leader, but not necessarily yet a manager, and they were going to turn me into a manager. And, you know, so I was given this great gift, this privilege that I frequently felt like I hadn't really necessarily earned. But I've achieved that. I would love to say that the imposter syndrome goes away. It doesn't. There's still a little annoying chirp on my shoulder all the time that I try to overcome. My strategy there is I stop, I ignore this, but also I make a list of things that I objectively know that I can do and accomplish, because the little voice over there is saying, you don't know anything, you shouldn't be here, this isn't your jig, this isn't your job. So dispelling that with some actual truths helps. But I think it's just that really that trying to feel like knowing that your job is less tangible than it had been in the past is a really big like brain shift, I think. And so getting your head wrapped around that, I think, is a really good start.
Absolutely. And I can see many of you nodding there. Does anyone have anything else to share on that subject?
I think I would like to add also how you need to like shift your time frames when you're an individual contributor. Also, like the results, you see them very quickly, and when you're an engineering manager, many times I feel like I give advice or coaching and like, well, I will see, or maybe not, if anything comes out of this. And then 6 months later, you see this person, you know, totally high performing or doing, you know, going the extra mile. And you think, well, maybe, you know, what we talked about 6 months ago was a starting point to like, you know, this outcome. So I think, you know, kind of like changing and being able to like understand longer term timeframes is another like important shift.
Would you say that's one of the biggest rewards then, you know, developing and seeing your team, you know, develop professionally and grow?
So for me, that's the biggest reward when I, you know, get to see someone building the career they want and kind of like succeeding at, you know, being in the uncomfortable position and stretching itself. I think it makes all of the challenging parts of management absolutely worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. 2 of my direct reports in the past year were actually decided to take on the path of engineering leader, and they were very successful. So yeah, that's like a great reward, right? That you feel amazing and you're just like, wow. You feel blessed that you were there for their journey, and it's just very rewarding. Of course, on the other end, there's always the possibility that you're going to have to terminate a direct report for poor performance. And luckily, I did not have to go through that, especially during COVID. So I was pretty lucky, but I'm sure other people have, and it is a big deal in my opinion, because you're talking about people's lives here, and that's probably the biggest challenge for me, is just thinking about that. And that's why I think if you can find a company that basically puts a lot of or invests a lot in keeping, you know, retention, keeping their employees, that is a big win for me.
Yeah, I think that picking up on what Stella said, a big issue when you become an engineer manager is that as an engineer, you're very easily straightforward in what you're doing, right? You code something, you make impact, it is tangible, as Lisa mentioned, it's easy for you to quantify, but it's like you're stopping a regular computer and you get into a quantum computer area. You're dealing with people more often, and people are waves of different impact on you. And it goes on for a long time. So seeing someone grow, it's the most impact you're going to have as an engineer manager. And especially if you're seeing issues with imposter syndrome, as Lisa said, it doesn't go away. You're caught every day and you look at yourself like, I can do this. It's give yourself credit when credit is due. That's the first thing. And the finish line is there. Everybody's going to have its own time to get there. You don't have to continue to try to get there all the time, like faster or quicker than other people. That is what I usually tell to myself to help. And seeing someone growth for me, it is the biggest impact that I can do as an engineering manager. After Lisa said, spend the day talking.
Thank you. And so whilst I have you, Rafaela, so a big question is, how do you ensure that you're continuously learning? In your first managerial role, and I know that you have progressed, it's from technical leadership to now that people management side, and it's taking those small steps. Like, how do you ensure that continuous learning?
I think that is such an really huge part of being an engineer manager. And what helps for me at the beginning was reading a lot of books, right? I read the Technical Career Path, which is the Clara book, a lot of books, the Elegant Puzzle, which is a very famous book. It helps you get into a better engineer manager mindset. Podcasts that help me. But after you start a little bit, you have to be able to balance learning new things and adapt what you learn for your engineers, because it's never going to be the same. Every engineer is going to have different goals, different ways with they deal with everything. So what really keeps me helps me keep it going on learning is always search for what's there being used, what is the what books are out, podcasts that I'm listening to, talking to other engineer managers. We have a very good culture of exchange in StockX, so we always get together and try to see if a problem is being solved with that or not, and as well as talking to other women in engineer, because some problems might be more familiar to get resolved like that. It is usually like a poll. I like to say it's a poll of subscriptions, right? I get a lot of people giving input all the time, from formal education and as well from people that are on the internship for a little bit longer.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to share on that subject?
I've found that seeking out and nurturing peer relationships with other managers has been extremely helpful for me wherever I go. If there is an existing network, I set one up, because those kinds of, as you move through and become an engineering manager, you can become more increasingly isolated. You're not on a team at the same level as you had been before. So finding other people that you can even just verbalize the things that you're going through, even if you're not looking for solutions, but helping and drawing on their experience in situations has been super productive and helpful for me. It's really good also to know that other people are going through the same thing, even if you can't see it.
Absolutely. And that probably leads on quite well to my next question, was like, how important is feedback on that journey to leadership? Stella, do you maybe have something to share on that?
Yeah, feedback is critical, right? Not just providing feedback, but also receiving feedback. And apparently, when I became a manager, I found out that it turns out that there's a right way and a wrong way to provide feedback as well as receive feedback. And you would think that after years and years as an engineer that I knew this or I figured it out, but no, there was a lot of I did have a pretty good learning curve when it came to feedback. The good thing is to find an organization that provides resources, right? That where you can learn about these things. So that's how I learned. We do have a lot of manager resources at CARS, and also be ready for some setbacks. You know, when you do receive feedback, or you implement your style does not work properly, your management style does not work properly with a particular individual contributor, then be ready to, you know, have some setback and then learn from it and definitely move forward. You know, you're not perfect. There is no such thing as perfection in any role, and all you can strive for is to get better and progress.
I agree strongly with what Estela just said, and tying it back a little bit to the previous question on building peer relationships, something that I have found super useful when I need, especially to deliver feedback that is maybe difficult, is relying on my peers to practice that conversation and even role play. So once you are actually delivering the feedback, you are a little bit more prepared on how to react to certain questions or reactions. I mean, of course, you know, there will always be surprises, but if you feel a little bit more confident or comfortable giving the feedback, that also helps a lot in the conversation. And in terms of receiving feedback, I usually strive with my direct reports to build a relationship where I tell them, if they give me feedback, I can be a better manager for them. So it's on their best interest to tell me what is not working out so I can do better. And I think that usually resonates, especially when we're talking about career growth and how can I be, you know, more supportive for their needs.
I think a good thing to also remember is asking people how they like to receive feedback, making sure that you're meeting them where they are. I have people who are violently allergic to public recognition, and so I tell them privately when they've done a good job. I have people who don't really love to hear things spoken, but would rather prepare for that conversation to have something in writing first. So checking in with everybody that you both give and receive feedback to and from is really helpful to make sure that you're getting it in the most effective way. Now, that's not always possible, but like if you can meet people where they're the most comfortable and most prepared, it's going to make whatever you have to talk about easier and less, it'll feel less heavy for everyone.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would like to follow up with what Lisa said is that when you're giving feedback, you need to keep it in mind that you're giving feedback to someone so they can advance their career, right? That feedback needs to be to the point that here's an action item that you talking like an engineer. It's something that you can do to work on. This is something you can do moving forward. So you are giving that feedback because you care about your engineer. I think that's the main point. And then you find what works for them, what listening, and what is better moving forward.
I just wanted to add one more thing, Rafaela. I just realized that for those who have children, learning these skills as far as providing feedback is really helpful for your kids as well. Sometimes my kids go, "Mom, you're treating me like one of your engineers?" No, I'm not, but you know, it's fine if I do.
I think typical questions that tend to come up, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in an interview for an engineering manager is, how do you manage a high performer, and how do you manage someone who's underperforming, conflict resolution? So yeah, I think that point of feedback is just so important. We have seen a couple of questions that have come into the Q&A box. I've got a couple more and then we'll jump into those questions. I'm very curious, and I know this is very different depending on organization and your role, but I'm curious to know, in reality, how hands-on is an engineering manager? I get a lot of requirements for, we need a hands-on engineering manager. And I think many will want to know like how to stay up to date with your technical skills. And in your opinion, how big can your team get before you're not able to have your hands in the code or containers, for example, like depending on your role? And I know that you all have, you know, all of your roles are quite different, but Ali, maybe you have something to share on that point.
That's a great question, and I think as everything, it depends. On my first management job was a co-climber, a small startup, and when I started as a manager, I would say I was still very hands-on because the team was very small, and they needed my support doing IC activities. But as the team grew, it became very evident very quickly that me owning IC activities was just a blocker, and I was there to help coordinate, to provide context, to align with the business. And then, I took a step back and kind of like maintain like more of like the architecture and design of the systems. I would say on my role at Stripe is actually pretty similar to what I was doing by the end of my time at co-climber, where I'm more involved on direction, high-level technical decisions and commitments, understanding risks and gaps, but not on the day-to-day activities. I fully trust that my team is better equipped than me to handle that.
Anyway,
Yeah, I think that's, sorry, Haley. I think that's what Ellie mentioned. You have to trust your team. You have to know that your team know what they are doing on going over it. And my answer is also depends, because I also had a phase where really more hands-on than what I am today. And I hopefully to be less and less and less as the time goes by. But you have to be able to trust the engineers that you give them the correct support, framework, tools, so they can make good technical decisions, and they are able to go over problems and solution. And that's also open them to grow, because if you keep going into problems to solutioning, you're not like the go-to person, you're the bottleneck, and you're taking away an opportunity for someone to growth and learn more. So it becomes a what do you need to do to better support your team? Sometimes it might make sense for a small company or something for you to be a little bit more hands-on. Sometimes it doesn't. So it depends a lot on that.
It's a really good point, but both ladies have made here, because what you're trying to do is be that force multiplier. So my job is it's both glue and lubricant, right? So like I'm moving impediments out of the way. I'm letting people, giving them what they need to do their job most successfully, removing obstacles, and I'm providing that overall context. Like my Monday calendar had 13 meetings in it. It's a lot of meetings, right? But that's meetings that my staff didn't have to go to. I could bring them that context and give it to them when they most needed it. So I'm sort of a shield from the things that would pull them away from their work, but I'm also there to give them that support when they need it. It's a different way of looking at being hands-on. I'm not going to be in the code, but I am going to help them so that they can make the code better and stronger. And I'm going to be there so that they can do those jobs and not have to worry about going to all these other meetings and hearing about all those other things and having their day pulled apart.
Thanks, Lisa. And Stella, I know that you are quite a hands-on engineering manager. What tips would you give, like staying, up to date with your technical skills? How do you, manage that balance?
Yes, I do. I am a hands-on manager. I do actually. Whenever I think of a role, an engineering role, I make sure that the company will allow me to, or the organization will allow me to actually get my hands dirty. So I think that just like with any technical skill, you just do the usual. You try to learn the technical skills. You stay involved in the code. For example, in my case, I'm still very involved in the infrastructure code. I still know how to code in Terraform, so I approve pull requests, on a regular basis. I also have my personal projects on the side, and I try to keep my certifications up to date. Of course, just not in the summertime. I usually do my studying when it's dark and cold in the wintertime. Summer's too much fun to spend studying.
So pretty much any time in London then. Cool. So
That's good.
we have a few questions in the Q&A. Maybe Yesenia, if you kind of want to go through some of those. I've seen a few that have come through.
Yes, I was actually, Stella was discussing how important is receiving feedback and giving feedback, but also I'm hearing, the support that you do provide for your engineers within their career. So David actually asks a really interesting question. How do you measure your performance as an engineering manager? I don't know what advice or what tips you have for him.
That was me. Okay, so I wasn't sure. Yeah, so for me, my goal as an engineering manager is to uplift my team. Mm-hmm. So the best way to measure whether I'm doing my job well or not is how my team is performing. If my team is performing well, that means I've done a great job. It's pretty straightforward, actually. So if you just focus on that and try not to get distracted by all the other things that you do on a regular, the minutia of all the fires that you're trying to put out, it's very rewarding, and it will help you focus on what you're meant to do in your role.
Awesome, thanks. But also another question here, kind of links up with what I've just previously asked, and Pavitra, she's quite curious to know if you've seen any instances where your male and female managers have handled the same situation, but quite differently. Ali, your response? I think you're like, yeah, 100%.
It's an open floor, whoever wants to take the question.
I'm not, I was thinking if I wanted to go into the details of the example, but I think I'm gonna skip that part. For sure, I think, usually my female manager peers tend to be more careful and thoughtful than quickly reactive, which for the most part, I usually think that's a plus. Rarely in management, there is a situation that requires you to react right away. So that it requires, I feel it requires less iterations, because you take a little bit more time to think, where I have seen situations where people react quickly, and then you either have to step back or you have to reassess the situation. If people are self-aware, they may need to apologize. So definitely that's something that I have noticed, and I myself try to do, but also recognizing that sometimes you need to move with urgency. So I try to balance being thoughtful with the urgency of the situation.
Thanks for that, Ali. I've got a few other questions that I would like to ask. As we all know, part of an engineering manager's role is hiring, and questions I'm often asked as a recruiter are either, how do I get to the next level at my current company? Or how do I get someone to hire me at the next level at a new company? Lisa, I know you've got a lot of experience.
I do. I'm happy to share. So I think there's two things. One, you have to say out loud that you want to move and grow and change, because if the people who are managing you don't know that, they're not going to seek out those opportunities for you to do that. So part of being a manager is finding opportunities for your individual contributors to lean into the things that they're most excited and interested in. So say out loud, speak your intention into the universe, do some of the work with some of these books that we've suggested. Laura Hogan's book in particular is a really great foundation for making that transition. Apologize for all the hamming and banging in the background. And also seek out opportunities where you can perhaps mentor someone. If you want to move into management, find places where you can volunteer and help out. Women Who Code is a great place. We always have opportunities for learning opportunities where you can come and give a presentation to a smaller, let's say more receptive group of humans who would love to hear you talk and be very supportive of you speaking. Practice, ask other people, find people who are doing the same thing that you want to do and ask them if they would talk to you about it. grab people on LinkedIn, find people in local networking groups, find people in global networking groups like we're talking about here. Talk to lots of people and get what their experience is. And not everybody's path is going to be the same, but it generally follows. Like if it's a thing that you're interested in, you have to put some focused concentration on getting toward it. Just like if you're picking up a new technical skill, it's very much a similar process. You got to read about it, learn about it, try it, do it, and keep moving. Engineering management is a very practical profession. And it's beyond like a skill, a discrete skill of a thing that you can do and you can accomplish, but it's a lot of things that are very practical. And so therefore, just like we talked about before, practice, role play with other humans, try all those things. At your same company, look for those opportunities. At a new company, you're going to have to tell them the story about why you are the right person for this job. That's like that in any job that you're trying to achieve. But sometimes when you're trying to make that jump from IC to engineering manager, you're going to have to talk a lot more in potentialities rather than actualities, which is a little fuzzy for some people. But the more things you can do that are hands-on, like mentoring, like working with groups, leading groups. I got my job exclusively because I was leading the Women Who Code chapter, and I had organized that from 0 to 1,200 members. And that was a thing that it was a tangible thing that I could point to and say that I had done this thing. So practice and point yourself at opportunities that are meaningful, and ask lots of questions of people around you who are doing the things you want to do. Finding a mentor can be tricky sometimes, but look for somebody who's close enough to you that they are accessible, but further enough down the path that it's a thing that you want to achieve. Like if you wanted to have, say, Dr. Jill Biden as your mentor, that'd be great. She's super supportive and lovely, but you can't call her up at the end of the day and be like, hey, Dr. Jill, I had this weird thing happen at work. What do I do? Right? That's not going to be a tenable relationship. So find somebody that you can have those kind of conversations with and aspire to follow in their path.
I absolutely love that. I love the point, because if you don't ask, we don't get. So I definitely agree with that. Rafaela, do you have any advice that you can give?
I think that Lisa said so well that it's going to be hard for me to follow up with anything that she hasn't covered. But I want to make sure that something that she said is it's noted. You have to make sure that your engineer is aware of your career plans, that you want to get into a manager path or you want to stay on the technical path, because your manager is going to be able to identify that. Hopefully you have a good manager. It's going to be able to identify that and give you the experience, the exposition that you need to be able to success on the next step when you go into an engineer manager position. And it doesn't matter how many things you did before, how many books you read, how many trainings you did. It's going to be like a 90-day program, right? Make a 90 days list, go over, set goals for yourself. And it's always good to make sure that you're moving forward and letting your leadership aware of your career goals.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Rafaela. I've got another question, and it actually interlinks with a Q&A question that someone has asked. So my next question is, how much experience do you need to become a manager? And Grace has also asked, at what point in your career did you feel you were ready to become an engineering manager? That's quite interesting. I don't know who wants to lead the floor with that question. Stella, you're smiling, so I'll ask you.
I think that it really depends on your industry, right? But in tech, I think, especially now that there seems to be like a hiring surge, I believe that the number of years has gone down. I don't know exactly what, it will depend on the company, obviously, in terms of how much experience you have as an engineer. There's also a lot of folks or engineers right now who are boot camp graduates. So they may have had a previous life as a manager, and then they went to boot camp, and then like a year later, they're back as an engineering manager. The reason I'm saying that is because we actually have that. One of my ICs went through that process. Because why would you have to wait when you know that this person has the skills, both technically and from a people skills perspective? Yeah, so that's time-wise, it's really, yeah, it really depends. And then when did I know that I wanted an engineering role? So I've always wanted to be just, doing my own like little cool stuff, right? It's so much easier to be an IC, to just pound away and build code or fix stuff or break stuff, whatever you're doing. But at some point in time, you're going to have to decide whether you want to make a bigger impact, to reach more people. And that's really what spoke to me. I do have a daughter, and although she does not want to do anything in tech, which is fine, I felt that a lot of women in tech do not have they don't have anyone to use as a template, and representation does matter. So that's really what drove me into becoming a manager versus just an individual contributor.
Thanks, Stella. Does anyone else want to contribute? Anything else to say?
Yeah. Go ahead, Lisa. You first.
So we stepped on each other there, and I apologize. For me, I go out and talk to groups of prospective, either people joining tech or changing careers, and tell them that, like if there's something that interests them, they should go for it. And if they see a job announcement that's exciting, or if there's an opportunity that's really thrilling, even if they don't have 100% of the listed qualifications, to go for it. And so when I was presented with that opportunity, like, hey, we want you to come be a manager, I was like, well, I can't keep talking to people about taking chances if I don't go ahead and take this chance myself. That would be very disingenuous. So it was sort of like the timing worked out really well, but also you kind of get to a point too. Tech is a demanding profession, and every 2 to 3 years, you kind of have to reinvent yourself or reinvest in yourself in a really meaningful way, and decide if it's, which direction you want to head. And so I had hit both of those things at the same time. It was kind of a lovely confluence of things, but just take a chance and go for it. If you feel like you're ready, because you're never going to be 100% ready. There's nothing like that in life. No guarantees.
That's very true. That is very true. I actually have another question, again, similar to what we're talking about. How does an introvert get into the engineering management path? Is it really feasible?
Well, I am a full introvert in reality. And I will say I organize my day-to-day life to have a long time and recharge myself. So I give myself very cognizant of that. I also try to, for me, one-on-ones, even when I love the practice of doing one-on-ones with my direct reports, they actually tire me because I pay extra attention to what they, how they react, what they talk about, what they don't say. So I try to spread them across the week. Like, I have found ways to manage my own energy, and it is totally doable, but I think you have to be very aware and like recognize your limits and then organize your schedule in a way that it works.
Thank you for sharing that, Ali. I've got another question. I know Rafaela spoke about podcasts and books that you read to keep learning and so forth. So the question is, do I need a certain qualification? Do I need training? What is the best course to do? Has there been any external education that has helped you? So books, podcasts, mentors, any specific ones that you want to name?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I would like to give the other panelists an opportunity to answer that as well as I give the initial answer. For me, it was initially getting into books and podcasts and having a mentor to get feedback and understand how is the path of engineer to engineer manager was crucial. I do know there's some people that goes and have MBAs, and there's a lot of courses out there. I can't speak of those, but if that is something that fits for you and your personality and that's how you move forward, I think it is valid.
Thank you. I know Lisa was also responding in the Q&A, so I know you have some to bring in.
Yeah, so there's a couple of really good ones. There's Plucky Management. Jen Derry has got both a series of training workshops as well as a really great quantity of supportive materials, including like a deck of cards that you can use for one-on-ones in case you get stumped for questions. It's super helpful. And so there's management training through there. Eager Labs does a great virtual management cohort. I actually found my my personal coach through them. And then there's the RANS Leadership Slack. It's RANS and Repose, if anyone knows, Michael Lopp is an engineering manager, but has set up this enormous community. There's thousands and thousands of global engineering leadership humans that come together in here. And you can find people to talk to. There's forums for every group, and there's some safe spaces for women and non-binary folks in there, which is great. And it's, again, it's being able to talk to the humans who are doing the job that you want to do very quickly, and seeing how they do their stuff as well. Those were super helpful for me.
Thank you for them. We'll also be adding, like I mentioned earlier on the white paper, these extra books and podcasts. So if you did miss any out, we'll definitely include them in those.
I just want to say, Lisa, thank you for all of those sources. I need to refresh my stuff. I do have a bachelor's in business and accounting, and so I leaned heavily on this. But you always, as an engineering leader, you had to refresh your skills, all the time. And but there are also like little things, like I think that if you're already in a role, pay attention to, your peers, right? The folks that you seem to be, that seem to be good in, like, have some leadership skills that you can you can emulate. Also, I think that, I know this is boring, but processes, like paying attention to process, writing skills, all of that, those are super important as when you become a manager. They're not as exciting, but the most important thing, I think, whenever you're doing anything that's uncomfortable, is to get a lot of sleep and practice self-care, because it's going to be fun.
Thank you so much. So this topic of kind of continuous learning, I think we've established that journey into engineering management, it's not always being linear. Every step needs to be that step forward. I'd like to talk a little bit about, how important is the right company and culture if you aspire on being a leader. Ali, do you want to share with us your thoughts?
I think the right culture is very important. I will say more than the right company is the right manager. If you have a good relationship with your manager and your manager is invested in growing your career, that is life-changing. Even if you are in a really small startup or in a big company, because your manager has a lot of influence on giving you access to opportunities. And that's exactly what you need to grow.
I want to talk a little bit about inclusivity as well, because I think regardless of where someone is in their career, building an inclusive and thought diverse culture is super important to allow people to grow. So what has been your experience around this, and how do you ensure inclusivity as a manager? Open to anyone who wants to take that one. I'm going to pick on someone now.
I'm happy to jump in here. This is a big, my big focus, and I go around and speak to companies on it, is how to retain workers. And I think that's a part of inclusion that is frequently overlooked. Frequently, the pipeline gets the most attention because it's sort of easy and visible, and you can point to it and there's numbers around it. But what do you do once you've hired somebody into your company? So it's those support systems that truly make the difference between inclusion and belonging, right? It's how you are treated once you're there. And so focusing on those things, those are more internal things for a company, and they're a lot more difficult, but you can start them, at your team level and make sure that you have the things in place. How do you help somebody new be successful? How do you help somebody integrate into the team quickly? What support do they have? One of my favorite thoughts is, you should forget that you're part of an underrepresented group, but have support when you remember. And it's that there, like, how are you supported when those sorts of either, you've had a day full of microaggressions or an actual, terrible event happens. How are you supported? What is the most, is there a direct reach out to humans who might be in crisis? Is there any sort of ERG organization that can help people peer-to-peer navigate or negotiate situations? It's all about those support structures. And if they're not there, set them up before you invite someone in. And if they're not working, make sure you fix those things before you invite someone in. So you have to look internally first, fix all of those things, ask the hard questions. Why are people leaving? Listen to exit interviews very carefully and make sure that you understand that there is work to be done and there will be continual work to be done. You may tell I'm a little passionate about this, but that's the number one problem facing underrepresented groups in technology today, is that retention. There's a revolving door, and if people don't stay, then they can't become managers. They can't stay in the profession long enough to move through their career and be productive that way. So how do you support them once they're there? That's the biggest piece.
Thanks, Lisa. I think that is so important, and also to recognize, which probably comes on to my next question, is recognizing that path to engineering management is not for everyone. There are some engineers who have no interest in traditional management, but they want to progress their careers as a technologist. I think it's important to recognize what are the career paths can people set out to accomplish, and how important is a top-down vision in making that happen. Ali, I know we had spoken about this. We'd had a discussion. It's okay to try it out. You can try out engineering management, and it's no problem to go back into an IC role. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
The career paths? Yeah.
Definitely engineering management is a transition, not a promotion. So it's just learning new skills and practicing new skills. I know a couple of folks that have tried it and gone back as an IC, and they do not regret it, because you as an IC become more aware of certain things that you usually are not. After having the experience, you are a better communicator, which is great as an IC as much as it is as a manager. Your ability to give feedback improves. And I think a skill that an IC and a manager need to know how to practice is leadership, regardless of whether you're managing people or not. So, and I will say, even if you are an IC, getting comfortable with the idea of building consensus on a group, creating influence, helping, mentoring people, helping people grow, it is extremely important, regardless of whether you go to a management path or not.
I concur. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Stella, just to add something, I completely agree with what Ali said. And I think that some of those feelings of going to engineering management, when it might not be for a person and you don't feel that you're ready, it's that some companies, that is the next step on your career ladder, right? If you're still not in the 2020, 2021 year, for you to get a raise or for you to get a better pay, you have to go to the next level. And then for some people feel like, oh, I should be an engineer manager for that. And then, and maybe it's something that you want, like, I'm going to go an engineer manager, I'm going to do this. And then it maybe not work and you go back to an IC. There is no issue on that. Like, that's one of the things that I tell my engineers. It's a job like any other, and if you feel that it's taking a toll on you, if you feel that it's not good for now, it is no problem for you to go back to be an IC and do what you learn, and as Ali mentioned, influence and be a leader and move the needle of where you are. I'm sorry, Stella, for stepping over you.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to concur to exactly what Ali said, which is leadership and seeing the big picture. Those are things that both ICs and engineering managers have to solve and have to figure out. Not just the engineering managers. Yeah. So, and as far as for our company is concerned, and most companies do this, if you don't want to be an engineering manager, you can be a staff engineer or a principal engineer or I don't know, I think that an architect role. Those are roles that actually, in terms of salary and you know how much influence you have on the company and the teams, are on the same level as engineering managers. So there is a path for that. It's not necessarily in every company though. So definitely, if you don't want to follow that, if you want a non-engineering manager role, make sure that you have that path in the company that you're with.
Thanks, Stella. So we have just a few minutes left. I think the last question will be like for everyone. So practical advice, just to kind of summarize, what advice would you give to someone who's now an engineer that wants to step into that leadership? Yeah, like whoever wants to kind of take that question. We've talked about mentors, coaching, you know, maybe that step to kind of managing a meeting.
Ask to hang out with your manager in some of their meetings. Like, just go and see what happens in them, because that was one of my biggest fears. Like, what even happens in this manager meeting? What do you talk about? What's going on there? So find a place where you can have those sort of, like, if there's open meetings, or if you just shadow you for a day and sit in on all the meetings you have. We work in a very practical profession where we frequently learn by doing, and this is just another way you can do that as well when you become a manager.
Yeah, I think most of the practical advice was already mentioned in all the other conversations or topics. One of the things that might also be useful is, you know, like in terms of getting feedback. The couple of things that I know helped me was I was a coach for my kids, you know, basketball or volleyball team, and I felt that coaching, you know, practice was really helpful for me. I also sometimes feel a little bit worn down when there are things that are not so good in terms of like things that are going on, and sometimes I just look for things that will inspire me, keep me going. And again, just reiterating here, self-care is super important. When you go into an engineering management role, you basically like have a lot more to figure out, and it can get overwhelming, and that's okay, you know, because everybody goes through that. You just have to, you know, acknowledge that, make sure you have the proper support, and do whatever makes you happy.
Thank you. So I know we do have some other questions in the Q&A. We are running short of time for the webinar, so but our panel will be in the networking session after. So you should have a link to the networking session in the chat box. Just wanted to say like a big thank you to everyone for joining us today. Huge thank you to our panelists. Yeah, it's been absolutely great. We hope to see you at the next Women in DevOps event, which I believe is on the 26th of August. I understand it's going to be a bit more of a technical discussion. Those details will be announced very soon. But until then, thank you to everyone. Take care, and we look forward to meeting you all in the networking session if you can join us.
Thank you.
Thanks.